Well, in that instance, the army officer who overthrew the government and seized power of it wasn't even a general. He was a little pipsqueak first lieutenant or something in the army. So I said to the patriarch, "Look, let's you and me pray about this. I can't see that this guy's helping Bolivia any." So we prayed and asked the Lord to get rid of him. A couple of days later, he was gone.
The unusual thing, and I think a blessing to us, when we were in Cochabamba, all the fighting was in La Paz and Santa Cruz. When we were in Santa Cruz, all of it was in Cochabamba and La Paz. When we were in La Paz, it was all in Cochabamba and Santa Cruz. We missed, every time we missed it. Okay, I came home on the bus and got there about 9:30 at night. My husband had been kind of worried about me, and I told him that there was going to be a revolution in Oruro, and we had to go there the next day for a state conference. And that's where all the fighting was when they ever had a golpe de Estado. And I really, we were concerned about it because that was been horrible to have been over there on a bus during all of that revolution. And so I reminded Gene that Elder Cook had said that my husband had more authority than anybody else in Bolivia had, including the president of the nation. And so we decided we better pray about it and ask the Lord to bless us that we could get over there to the state conference.
To intervene and prevent it from occurring.
And so my husband prayed, and the next morning we got ready and went to La Paz as though we hadn't even heard about it. And we went on a bus, and the bus was a wonderful bus, really modern. But for Bolivia, it was a surprise. But we got there, held a conference, and got on the bus, came back home, and nothing happened. And the next day in the newspaper it said, we were supposed to have a golpe de Estado yesterday, but we don't know what ever happened because it never came off. We were the only ones that really knew why the golpe de Estado hadn't come off.
And we weren't going in to tell them.
They could hardly get through the blockade down at the bottom, but somehow they talked them into letting them come up. And so we had to walk under a bridge with our suitcases, and they usually stood up on the bridge and would throw rocks down on anybody going across there. And so we were pretty brave to tackle that. But we got to the edge. Usually the APs could come right up to the airport, but they couldn't this time. And so we had to walk quite a ways. And when we got to the place to wait for the elders, they finally got there, and they said, or we got in their van, and they told us the hard trouble they had trying to get up there. And we got in the van to leave, and there was a whole human fence, blockades to keep us from going down to La Paz. And the elder companion to the one driver said, "Got it." And my heart sank to my feet. I thought, sure, we're going to kill somebody. What would we do in Bolivia? Was somebody dead? Oh, it scared me to death. But they dropped arms and left. But all they did was throw a rock and dent it in the fender. But there was a lady missionary that was really new in Bolivia. And if you've ever been in Bolivia, you would be pretty homesick when you first got there, because it's really different. And she said she was so homesick, she really wanted to go home. And she went to a stake conference, and then she looked up on the stand, and there was the stake patriarch that had given her her patriarchal blessing sitting on the stand. And she says, "Oh, what a blessing it was to me. You can never believe how helpful that was."
Bolivia. In Bolivia, you have to have a passport no matter where you go.
And I could not find my passport anywhere. I looked and looked everywhere. And so I knelt down to pray before getting to bed, and I prayed that I might be able to find it, because I was in charge of teaching the primary and release study and everybody their duties down there, and they were expecting me, and I couldn't get out of town without my passport. So I knelt down and prayed, and I jumped into bed, and the minute I got in bed I thought, oh, I wore a certain suit last week, and it might be in the pocket. I got up and went right over there and picked it out of the pocket. Another time we needed something really badly, and I couldn't find it anywhere, and I had looked all over the table where I thought I'd left it, and I couldn't find it, and I prayed about that, and I got up and went right in and looked between the two tablecloths. I had a colored one under a lace one, and it was between the two, and there it was. I wouldn't have ever found it had I not been inspired. That happened at least 7 times while I was in Bolivia, things similar to that. We had a little bit of extra time, so we went over to a park there, and a man was showing us all through the park. And when I first entered, I had a cosmetic bag, and I didn't think about it, and this monkey just snatched it from me. And it had a zipper on it. He unzipped it, and we'd walk around there, and pretty soon he was up on a post, and there he had unzipped it, and he had my lipstick. He was trying to put it on his lips, and he wouldn't give it back. If I went to get it, he would run away again.
Actually, he was trying to eat it.
And so, finally, at the very end of this whole trip through there was an interesting park. They had these fish that are, what are they called? And they lap real hard, but they would eat a person if they fell in there. I can't remember what they're called. But all kinds of interesting things. And finally, when we got through, the guide came bringing me my purse. So somehow he got it from the monkey.
An enthusiastic member of the church, and still isn't. Enclosing a letter from one of my aunts who also had left the church, making some rather derogatory comments about me running off to serve a mission when my family needed me so badly in the middle of a depression. So I wrote a short letter to the mission president and sent him the letter. I said, I'm sending this to you, so you tell me what you want me to do, and I'll do it. So he wrote back, and he said, the law on which blessings are predicated says, quote, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all else that you need will be added unto you. Unquote. Your father has never sent $5 to help support you on your mission. And until he does, I doubt that he's going to start getting very prospered by the Lord. He said, my advice to you is that you stay and fulfill your mission. That's what you're called to do. So then, being a fairly bright young man, I took a look to see what lady missionary had typed up the president's reply. And her name was Ray Stevens Jones. So naturally I said, who's that? I've never heard of her. So when she came to San Diego, I thought, well, I better take a look and see who wrote the letter for her, typed the letter. So then I had to marry her to keep it quiet.
Well, I went to San Diego because we were making a mission tour with the mission president, Antonio Ivans, over the whole mission, and the 3 girls were singing and I was playing my violin. And when we were going to go to Los Angeles, I asked my mission president if my mother could come down there and if my boyfriend at home could bring her down, and so they came down. Well, my mother was always looking out after my welfare, and she asked me which of all these missionaries in the zone conference did I think what I might possibly like. And I said, well, it looks like Eugene Olsen is the most serious-minded of these missionaries. And that's the last I really thought about it, but I just thought he looked like a good, serious missionary. And then after we got back to El Paso, somewhat many months later, he was made a district president in El Paso, and I still worked in the office. But he came to the office occasionally, but not a lot. But he and my companion had such a good sense of humor that I had him hooked up with her. I thought maybe that they would make a good pair. So after he is released from his mission, and a long time later I was, we ended up in a general conference, and I moved over and had her sit by him because I thought that would work out well. But we wrote letters for a long, long time, but just like brothers and sisters, because our mission was such a closely knit. We always wanted to have our one city and have all the missionaries live in that same city so we could be all together. And so it was, he had been home 2.5 years and I'd been home 1.5 when my missionary companion got married to a CIA agent who had been a missionary in our mission, and he wanted Gene to come with him. I guess it was to help drive, and also so as a chaperone to the wedding. And so he asked me he wrote me a letter and said, I was going to my companion's wedding, and I wrote back, and he got it in the temple. I said, I can't go because I just went to Ogden a month before that and they wouldn't let me off work. And I said, but why don't you come via way California? Meaning the whole bunch, because I really wanted to see my companion. And it's not quite the way back to Washington, D.C. But he didn't know whether I meant single or you singular or plural, because in English it doesn't say. So he prayed about it, and he thought, well, if I get back to my cousin's house and if there's some money there, then I will go. Well, sure enough, there was some money, but he asked his cousin, what do you think? And he thought, well, a faint heart never won a fair lady, you ought to try it. And he got on a bus to come down there, but he kept wondering why he was doing it, and he got off at one bus stop and went over in a row of trees or somewhere anyway, and he prayed about it, and he kept feeling the go ahead, keep on going down and see me, and I kept thinking, oh, why is he coming here all by himself? So anyway, he came there, and I had my hair set, and I was pretty good looking. I was looking good, and my mother really liked him. And so I think it was because my mother kept pushing it, partly. But we went to the park that night, and we had missionaries hands off, and so as we walked in the park, I stepped on something squashy, and I grabbed a hold of his hand because it felt like I stepped on this frog or something. And that kind of broke the ice a little bit. We rode our bicycles first to the river, and then we rode them back over to Reseda Park. And so he talked to me, and he said, I've been looking for a red light all along, and I've never seen a red light yet. And I didn't realize it was a proposal, but he thought it was. And so he went down the next day and bought a ring.
If it wasn't a proposal, how come you said, but if I married you, I couldn't have any children with beautiful brown eyes?
I can't remember saying that. But anyway, he got the ring the next day, but I couldn't wear it because I wasn't at all sure. I had the boyfriend at home that I knew I wouldn't marry, but he's the only one, and he's always there, and I didn't want to break his heart and all that. And then the elder that was in Ogden, I'd gone back there the month before. He was going in the Army, and he had called and told me to bring a temple recommend. He said, and if when you get here we decide we might get married, but my stake presidents and bishops said that's not a very good way to go, and so they wouldn't give me the recommend.
Good for them.
And he had never kissed a girl before that.
You can tell I didn't know much about it. Practically lost the whole ball game on the first throw of the ball.
So he went back to Washington, D.C., and every week he sent me a dozen roses, red roses. And he'd have moonlight and roses, or give me 1 dozen roses, put my heart beside them and give them to the one I love. Kind of think there'll be orange blossoms later, kind of think that there will. Anyway, whatever. And every week for a month, he sent me a dozen roses every week with some song about roses, and I could never figure out how he got them in his handwriting there. I can see why he could send roses, but not with his handwriting and the music kind of written out. But anyway, so about 2 weeks later, one of my girlfriends sent him a telegram, and we had decided ahead of time we'd do this. A telegram that was just a plain, everybody writes, you know, and in those days they were only a quarter, I think. And so it said something about, how did it go? Do you remember that telegram? Anyway, I accepted him and started wearing the ring. Okay, this sister of Bernard had said, our family will fast with you, you've got to make a decision. And so I fasted, and when I went back to work at noon, I think of one and the other and the other and the other, and yeah, I just felt a calmness when I would think of my husband, and the others a little bit, well, not so good. And I didn't know then that you're supposed to make up your mind and then pray, is this the right decision? They've taught a lot more about that lately than I knew at that time, but all I knew is that you'd feel good or else have a stupor of thought. And so I felt better about him, and my mother thought he was a really fine person. I went a lot by her judgment. And the thing was, when I was going through high school, I was the only member of the church in high school many of the years, and my mother was afraid I might marry out of the temple or marry a non-member. And so she taught me to pray. She said, if you'll pray and ask the Lord to send you someone worthy to be married in the temple, he'll send you one, even if he has to cross a continent. And I thought that was unusual. She used the very words that happened, because he was in Washington, D.C., and I was on the opposite end of the continent when he came to see me. So no doubt he was the one the Lord wanted me to have.